there is a game, Bolt Action. It's a table game about World War II. It's something kind of Warhammer. It's usually played on company-sized level infantry with some support units. Today I would like to discuss with you army list of Germany in World War II. Cutting Hell's Highway, Black Friday, 22nd 1994. This army list is based upon the troops and equipment made available to the German armies throughout 6-year wars in Europe, Russia and North Africa. The German army starting with its infantry equipped with bolt action, MG-34 light machines, guns and grenades. By 1945, they would be carrying assault rifles, the improved MG-42 medium machine gun and Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets. Their vehicles also changed, from lowly Panzer I, Panzer II light tanks to monstrous behemoths like Tiger II and Jagdtiger. This is the official bolt-action army list for the forces of Germany in World War II. The fuller and more detailed listing both augments and supersedes the shorter army list found in the bolt-action rulebook. Players can pick up an army in either of two ways. Use the reinforced platoon selector from bolt-action rulebook in conjunction with the army list in this book to save referencing back to the rulebook. The generic reinforcement platoon selector is repeated below. Instead of using generic reinforced platoon selector, use any of the theater selectors starting here in conjunction the army list given in this book. Either method is perfectly acceptable depending on what kind of game do you wish to play. The first method uses the generic selector is more flexible and therefore ideal for pickup games against any opponent, as it allows for a wide variety of different kinds of troops and equipment. The second method, using theater selectors, is more historically representative and therefore better suited for games where historical refight is envisaged. For example, all-conquering assault during the early phases of Operation Barbarossa or the desperate defenses of the Atlantic Wall. We imagine that players will, on the whole, prefer to fight battles within specific historical context, which can, in this case, simply use the appropriate theater selector to choose your army from. Here are German paratroopers, Fallschirmjägers. And what rules do they have? Special. Blitzkrieg. German officers were expected to act on initiative and take decisions built on their judgment rather than wait for orders on confirmation from HQ. This made very effective tactical commanders and made Wehrmacht a formidable reactive force. German officers using human snap to action special rule can take additional order die from the back and assign its normal. In other words, a German second lieutenant takes 2 dice instead of 1, a German first lieutenant Oberleutnant takes 3, and a captain Hauptmann takes 4, and German major takes even 5. Initiative trading. Even at a squad level, in the German army, every man is trained with some of the skill of his superiors, and is encouraged to show initiative and decisiveness rather than just sit and wait to receive orders. As an infantry squad, NCO, it means Sarge, is killed, roll a d6. On a score of 1, the NCO is removed as normal. On the roll 2 or higher, one of the troopers takes over the squad and leads it just effectively as before. To represent this, leave the NCO in place and remove any other model instead. It is assumed the new squad leader swaps his weapon with the ones carried by NCO, if different. If the NCO is successfully replaced, the unit does not suffer the usual -1 moral penalty for losing its NCO. Hitler buzzed so. German-made machine guns, but in particular the lethal MG-42, it shot maybe 25 rounds per 1 second. Imagine the volume of fire, really torrent. Are vastly superior to the enemies and rightly feared by the light infantrymen. German line and medium machine guns fire extra shots. Note that this applies to all light and machine guns, both those carried by infantry units and vehicle-mounted ones. Tiger fear. Such was lethal reputation of Tiger tanks that often Allied troops were spooked by the appearance of any German heavy armor, mistakenly thinking that this is a Panzer IV was a Tiger waiting in ambush. All enemy units that have line of sight to one or more German vehicle, the Tiger fear special rule. Suffer from Tiger fear. Units suffering from Tiger fear count as having an extra pin marker on them when taking any order tossed, except to fire against a vehicle causing Tiger fear. Note that this penalty also affects units without any pin marker, which must therefore take an order test on a -1 moral to execute orders even they have no pin markers. Every Allied tanker worst nightmare. You see how beautiful art it is. German machine guns, alongside with the famous MG34 and later MG42, there were other not so popular guns. Officers were brave, they were always highly skillful, and they have a regular or veteran rank. And for example, German infantry were generally well trained, well led, and well equipped, constituting what was undoubtedly the most effective fighting force in Europe, man for man. But the German army was also heavily outnumbered, and as the name progressed, it compromises its recruitment, equipment, shortages, and failure of leadership at the highest level. I was told that in Germany it took for them 6 months to train their infantrymen, and for example in Soviet Union up to 3 weeks. You see the difference. Began to take their toll. By 1945 there was also a very mixed bag, from superb experienced troops to militia with only rudimentary training. Heer Infantry Squad. The Heer Army formed largest component with the Wehrmacht and provided bulk of manpower early to mid-war. These are the men in field-grade uniforms, coal castle helmets, and jackboots who march into Poland, France, Russia, mostly on foot, but sometimes riding bicycle, transport, on trucks. So it's quite ordinary infantry squad. For example, you can improve the number of infantrymen by 5. You can give them submachine gun for close combat. You can give them one light machine gun and another will be loader. And also you can give them bicycles to move faster, and also you can give them anti-tank grenades. Doctrine and training. The German army had developed its own doctrine for training and combat, encouraging officers and NCO to take the initiative and act. With leadership encouraged unexpected, even down to the lowest level of squad leading NCO, German units were heavily outgunned, on the brink of collapse, often fought on. Junior officers often form ad hoc, special for this case units, from stragglers and survivors, and got them back into a battle when all seemed lost. Functioning ineffective combat units could be drawn together from any available troops. Cooks, clerks were often thrown into the fighting and performed well. Especially in the east, surrounded German units time and again formed on beyond hope of rescue and managed to escape capture. Infantry squad tactics developed throughout the war maximized the firepower of powerful German machine guns. Riflemen were used to keep the machine guns supplied with ammunition and to protect the gun from being outflanked, fighting to buy the machine gun teams time to redeploy or open fire, before withdrawing themselves under machine guns covering fire if it's necessary. Defensive positions were carefully planned with fallback firing positions already in place, squads well equipped with excellent weapons, and many Panzer Grenadier, it means motorized infantry, dismounted the machine gun from their half tracks when required given the extra firepower. Fallschirmjäger were also supplied with MG34 and MG42s. While the army fieldcraft tactics and low-level command were exemplary, its higher command remained problematic. The main different factions made a complex and fraught command structure. With the Führer directly controlling some elements of the army, higher command for the Wehrmacht and Heeren East, plus the Waffen-SS and Luftwaffe its own command structures, orders were slow in reaching units at the fronts, whose own commanders were powerless to make their own decision. Army and corps commanders found their plans and orders delayed by higher commanders and political consideration. Later in war, the cause was severely hindered as the Allies had cracked the German ciphers and were reading the encrypted secret communication. So here we see improved veteran infantry squad. They have better morale, and NCO can have a submachine gun. Well, here is one hero, and here are bikers. They have NCO on 5 men, they can have up to 3 additional men plus 10 points, and also one of them can have a light machine gun. Here Grenadier Squad. In 1943, title of infantry was changed to Grenadier to improve esprit de corps, given the poor infantry sum of wanted Panzer Grenadiers reputation kudos. German grenadiers were provided with the best light machine guns of the war, and some squads too. By the late war, most German grenadier squads were carrying a proportion of STG assault rifles or submachine guns instead of rifles to increase their firepower against enemy, increasing equipped with submachine guns and semi-automatic rifles. However, the exact weaponry carried could vary greatly in practice, with a low squad to be built as follows. So this is infantry squad, but they can have 2 assault rifles, and also they can have 1 machine gunner and 4 Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons. And here we have veteran grenadier squad. Those men that survived quickly learned the art of fieldcraft and become formidable opponents, battle hardened, well equipped, a match for any enemy infantry. Panzer Grenadiers, the infantry of Panzer Division, rode to battle in half-tracked armored carriers. Well, they did it on paper, but in reality, a shortage of half-tracks meant that only 10% of Panzer Grenadier battalions had their carriers, APCs, and 90% relied upon the trucks and fought on foot. What do we see here? 10-man squad, then 6 of them can have submachine guns, and even 9 of them can have assault rifles. It's extreme firepower, especially in close range. And also they can have 4 Panzerfaust. It's serious. Here Pioneer, all Panzer divisions included their own organic combat engineer units, known as Pioneers or Panzer Pioneers. They were equipped for attacking enemy fortification as well for mine clearance and demolition work. Unlike other nations' engineers, they were regarded as combat troops and were called upon to lead attacks against the toughest enemy position, frequently riding the battle into armored carriers. So it also can be up to 10 men, 6 of them can have submachine guns, plus 3 points, 1 can become a machine gunner, and 1 will have a flamethrower, which negates enemy cover save and destroys enemy morale. I really like battle painting. Sturm Pioneer Assault Engineer. I am a great fan of Warhammer. I like unit Assault Terminators, it's something like of a kind. Germany assault engineers were skilled at building all manner of fortification, communication, tank traps and minefields. In addition to building useful structures, they were adept at the destruction of similar enemy position, blowing up railway lines and making roads unsafe for the enemy to travel along. As the German quest for global superiority stalled and finally crashed down around them, the pioneers were tasked with the vital job of slowing the light advance, led by booby traps, minefield, blown bridges, the scorched earth strategy, taking the fight directly to the enemy. Often overlooked in favor of dashing panzers or elite Waffen-SS troops, the pioneers were unsung heroes of German military machine. So what do they have? 10 men, 6 machine guns, submachine guns, 1 machine gun, 1 flamethrower, 1 Sturmpistole, and even grenade launcher. They're serious guys. Well, and here is like some kind of mortar. Maybe you know a story about Battle of Monte Cassino, where German paratroopers fought against all odds and virtually win. It was a very tough battle. It's like Stalingrad, but up into the Alpine mountains. So they conducted airborne operations during the invasion of France against Norway, captured the island of Crete in 1941. In Operation Mercury, despite taking heavy casualties, Crete would be their last major airdrop. Only problem the paratrooper faced was their weapon, including rifles, submachine guns, were dropped separately in canisters, meaning that only upon the ground they were unarmed until the canisters were recovered. The rule assumes that canisters have been recovered. So they cost 14 points per each model because they are veteran. They can have 2 submachine guns, 1 light machine gun, and they are stubborn. Paratroopers don't give it easily. If forced to check their morale, they always test on their full moral value, ignoring any pin markers for battle fatigue. Fallschirmjäger late. After the heavy losses on the Crete, the Fallschirmjägers were reduced to an infantry role, forming elite infantry units. They were also re-equipped, modernized, losing of their much specialist lightweight weaponry in the favor of standard issue weapons, anti-tank guns and field artillery. Some units even gained armored vehicle. The Luftwaffe developed their own assault rifle, FG-42, which was the only issued to Fallschirmjägers. So they can have 6 submachine guns, up to 9 assault rifles, 2 light machine guns, and 2 Panzerfaust. And they are stubborn, they have good morale. Gebirgsjäger, German mountain troops, were elite infantry trained and equipped to fight in mountainous and other difficult terrain and extreme climatic conditions. Drawn from both Wehrmacht and SS units, they saw action in all theaters they were suited to their deployment, such as the invasion of Norway, the battle along the Finnish-Soviet border, operation in the Caucasus, and the mountains and broken terrain of Crete and Italy. The symbol was Edelweiss, a flower that also they traditionally wore in their caps and collars. Well, also they can have skis, so they can ignore penalties for snow and other winter conditions. Gebirgsjäger squad late war. It was upgraded with most advanced weaponry, but they often carried large amount of specialized mountaineering equipment. They tended to carry a smaller proportion of automatic weapons compared with other elite infantry. So veterans, 2 submachine guns, 2 assault rifles. So they aren't extremely tough. Waffen-SS squad. The Waffen-SS squad formed an elite fighting formation separate to the German army and were not strictly part of Wehrmacht. Often fighting in the forefront of an offensive, they proved themselves dangerous adversaries. They were recruited through the Nazi Party, and many were fanatical about expanding their ideology of fascism and driven by ugly racial hatred. So what do we see here? Veteran elite infantry, 2 submachine guns, 2 light machine guns. Well, and also they can become fanaticals, plus 3 per man. Here we see some art. And then Waffen-SS late war. By later in war, the Waffen-SS had taken severe losses and many of their replacements came from foreign nationalities. It had expanded, many of its divisions were not the quality of original units had been. Some barely the equal of Heer units, while others did retain their hard political edge. Even as the Third Reich crumbled, the Waffen-SS retained in favor status and continued to receive preferential treatment in terms of records, many very young equipment, and even in the end, many Waffen-SS units were still equipped with the best the Third Reich could provide. So, first, veteran, 6 machine guns, 9 assault rifles, 2 machine guns, and also they can become fanaticals. Well, no, it's some cavalrymen, nothing interesting except the cavalry carbines. The short-barreled rifles count as pistols when used from horseback and rifles when used on foot. Osttroop and squads. The German army could include green unmotivated elements, though this would have been rare before the final years of the year. Ostrupets were units recruited from the occupied territories of the East, often amongst people who had no great love of Stalin's Russia and who welcomed the German occupation. This included ethnic groups like Turkmen, Kalmyks, Armenians, Azerbaijani, Georgians, as well as Baltics, Finns, Ukrainian, White Russians, Siberians. These units were generally kept away from the fighting until the last few years of war, when they often surrendered en masse rather than face Allied troops. This entry can also be used for inexperienced recruits or ersatz trained battalion. Ersatz, it means substitute. So inexperienced infantry, they are very weak and they try to avoid battles. They are nearby losers. The only thing they are good is just to soak up enemy fire. End of 5 Kopeiek Bridgehead. God bless Peter Dennis, wonderful painter. Every picture what I have seen from him is the best. What a style. Volksgrenadier Squad. As the German found an increasingly difficult to field enough men or equipment, it was decided to create new types of formation with more emphasis on light automatic weapons, in particular the new STG assault rifle, partly to compensate lack of training and experience among recruits. Volksgrenadiers should not be confused with Volkssturm, a desperate militia of old men and young boys. In theory, at least, the Volksgrenadier were formed around a core of veteran troops and NCOs and were often highly motivated and patriotic fighters. Units were often under strength and supply problems meant they carried an assortment of weapons. Also, we have chosen to present them as ideally intended, to arm to the teeth with assault rifles. While many Volksgrenadier units crumbled before the enemy, others fought with astonishing tenacity. And to reflect this, these rules give a chance emerging regulars or veterans under fire. In experienced infantry, you have to roll the dice. In case after the first casualty, you roll a d6 dice, and in case of 5-6, they upgraded to veterans. You don't know before the battle what will be the roll. So what do we see here? They can have, for example, 13 points for a assault rifle, very good choice. One submachine gun and one machine gun. Luftwaffe Field Division, they were very weak. So what do we have? 2 men, submachine guns, Panzerfaust, nothing, they're losers. Volkssturm Squad. If the Ostrupen were unwilling soldiers, the Volkssturm, literal people storm, were a different kettle of fish entirely, militia recruiting from among the old and fit young. Many were drawn from the ranks of Hitler Youth or among the veterans of World War I. They were ill-equipped with a variety of weaponry, including crudely made Volkssturm MP308 submachine gun and Volkssturm rifles. As they carried weapons captured from other nations earlier in the war, or guns dating back to the previous century. Most did not have a uniform, but wore civilian clothing with just black armband emblazoned with a Deutsche Volkssturm Wehrmacht to show their alliance. Volkssturm battalions were theoretically formed only for the defense of their own military district, but many ended up being sent to frontline. Well, so they are inexperienced infantry, but they can under combat be modified to fanatics. The only thing they are good to fight enemy tanks, because they are cheap and they have 4 Panzerfaust. And then we have Hitler Youth Squad, a paramilitary organization. The Hitler Youth was set up by the Nazi Germany, an ideology to the youth of Germany, and thus indoctrinate the next generation of party members. They were not trained for combat, but by the end of the war were being conscripted into military service. Teenage boys were given basic weapon training and expected to fight and die in defense of their fatherland. Often the NCO was a veteran or invalided soldier returning to duty. Despite their age, these boys often fought with great courage, tenacity, sacrificing themselves in a hopeless case. One of my relatives, he was in Berlin, and he told me such that those young boys, they screamed and shitted, but they kill 100 or 200 tanks each day. So what do they have? 10 men, cheap, even 5 Panzerfaust, serious, and party indoctrination. Hitler Youth squads are green and must test the first time they suffer a casualty. But they become to regular infantry as a result of test. But in case they improve, they become fanatics. So it's a very good choice. The best armies I consider late SS units and Hitler Youth. Fighting at the Pas de la Selle. Kriegsmarine squads, they are just former Marines, they are nothing. They are not worth it. They are low quality. Then medium machine gun, don't forget that they shoot extra. And here we have improved anti-tank weapon. Then we have anti-tank rifle team. And what is the most interesting, it's a Goliath demolition team. The Goliath was used by German engineer units in a variety of roles. It was essentially a radio-controlled tracked bomb with 100 kilograms of explosive, carrying a big charge of high explosives direct to where it was needed, commonly a pillbox, minefield, a disabled enemy tank. The controller steers the robot tank by using a wire connecting to the simple control box. The Goliath was fairly successful and used on many fronts, and though it was slow and vulnerable to small arms fire, would be frightening sight as it rumbled towards you with its deadly payload. So it's tank hunters, it's very good against tankers, it has a remote operated mine. The Goliath model is just a marker which is treated as a one-shot weapon with a range of 18. Goliath can only target stationary vehicles. It has any vehicle that is not sporting another dice showing a run or advanced order or unit inside a building. Goliaths are fired as normal, except instead of rolling to hit, rolls the following chart. Note that a wrecker vehicle reacts to Goliath attack by moving, and mine automatically scores on the result of 1-4. Well, so 1-4 Goliaths break down, damages, or prematurely detonate by enemy fire. The Goliath model is removed and has no effect. 5-6, it's from D6. The Goliath reaches the target and it is detonated. If the target is a vehicle, it suffers a hit with a penetration of 7, no pen modifier supply. If the target is a unit inside building, the unit is hit by the equivalent of heavy howitzer. Remember that it is the explosion scores 12 or more hits. It brings down the entire building, killing everyone inside. So you can roleplay lots battles. For example, you can roleplay even Warsaw Uprising of 1944. So I highly recommend you this game. It's as good as Warhammer.